recording. There we go. All right, welcome back. Everybody, welcome back. I have plenty of announcements. So, I'm going to go ahead and start off with our first announcement. So, yes, we do have a computer science club. If you are interested in that, the computer science club meets in the E building in room 220, and they're going to meet today at 2 o'clock and tomorrow at 2 o'clock also. Jorge Vega, my good colleague, runs that club. He's the person that runs that club. So if you are interested at all in that, you can go ahead and show up at 2 o'clock today or 2 o'clock tomorrow, or contact Mr. Jorge Vega for more information. And if you missed this information, I'm recording it. So there you go. Oh, other announcements. Let me go back to other announcements. So today is the end of the content for the first exam in this course. The first exam covers chapters 1 through 4 in Computing Essentials only, not the lab work. There will be no questions about the lab work. I separated lab work from course content with Computing Essentials, so we're only going to do the exams with Computing Essentials. It does not include any of our lab work. The lab work, I want you to actually learn something practical and use these applications and learn without having to worry about quizzes or exams from that piece. I know some 105 instructors like to do that. I'm against that. I want you to have the full training experience when we do our Thursday sessions instead of worry about menial stuff like that. So anyway, those are my announcements for today. Again, Computer Science Club. If you're interested, again, today at 2 o'clock, tomorrow at 2 o'clock in room E220. All right, so let's get to it. So in chapter 1, I talked about how we use application software, which was chapter 3. But today I'm going to focus more on system software. Now, a lot of the time, we only care about system software for a couple of reasons. Number one, especially on your phones, when your applications need updating or when the operating system needs updating for that matter. Okay, let's focus on the operating system. When your operating system needs updating, then you care about your system software. Or on your computers, if something goes wrong, like an application doesn't open or it stops, then you care about system software. Or, now I'll get into the printer story when we get to device drivers. We'll get there in a minute. But keep in mind, and you're going to hear me say this a couple times in this class, computers are what we call ubiquitous. They're everywhere. And they should work when we need them to work. They should be there. They're always there when we need them. We don't really think about what's going on in the background, though. We don't really think about any of that stuff when we're using our applications. Because we're running our applications and everything's great. You don't think about those things. I don't think about those things, really, until there's an update to the operating system. Or, I don't throw my wife under the bus too much, but I'm going to here. Or in the event where she doesn't like Windows 10 and wants to go to Windows 11. And I'm like, well, I don't get Windows 11 for free, so we're going to have to find a way to buy it so I can install it. No, we're not going to pirate it. So anyway, programs like operating systems, utility programs, device drivers, I'm going to cover all of this today in this chapter. And of course, I'm going to start, and I warned you all about this. I'm going to start off, the cheesy video's coming up, don't worry. I did warn you about that. So, for your extra credit purposes, this is part of it. So, well, not yet. Your extra credit's coming up. So, the purpose of system software is to handle technical details, like the operating system, the utilities. Yes, we'll go over utilities today, device drivers. And this is not like spoken language translators, like English, Spanish, etc. This is more computer programming language translators. So that's all system software. Okay, now for your extra credit. You have one question on your extra credit that you must answer correctly, or I will not give you the 5 points, no matter what you have below that. So here's the answer to your question. Operating systems handle technical tasks. It's a collection of programs that handle technical tasks. So what I mean by that is It helps to manage resources like memory, your hard drive storage space, the amount of the central processing unit that's being used by every application that's open. Those are all the types of resources that I'm talking about. The main thing about an operating system is that it provides you and me with a user interface. It allows us to interface with the hardware. And I hope you know that it allows us to run applications. We talked about applications last week. So the examples are up here. Yes, I'm going to be talking about a lot of these today. We also call operating systems the software environment or the platform. So if somebody technical starts talking with you and asks you what your software environment is, all you got to do is just jokingly say, oh, you mean the operating system. My operating system is this. So yes, I like to do that with technical people. I'm like, why don't you just ask me for the operating system? So anyway, yeah, if you ever have to deal with those types of technical people, you're allowed to joke with them. It's okay. They have a sense of humor. All right, first cheesy video of the day. I told you I had some cheesy videos. So this is actually the best video that I've found to show the evolution of operating systems from 1978. Yes, you're hearing me right. 1978, I'm older than that, by the way, to August 2015. So yes, growing up, I saw all of this, which was really, really fascinating. But I'm going to play the video without music. Yes, I'm going to mute it. And I'm going to talk while it's going. All right, people online, I'm going to turn off my video capture device so you can see the video. And I'm not going to mute myself. All right, here we go. Here we go. This is Apple and Windows only, everybody. So 1978. Yes, that was a long time ago. You notice that it's like Commodore, right? Commodore Basic. So like, what do you notice about these screens? They're all what? It's all what? Black. No, it's all made up of what? Wow, this is an easy one. It's made up of numbers and letters. Thank you. So it was all command line for quite a long time. 1978, 1980 comes around. You'll notice that, yes, all these various operating systems are here. They're continuing to be command line interfaces. You notice there's no graphics yet as of 1981. Time moves on. We go through 82. Early versions of disk operating system. By the way, disk operating system DOS still exists. It's called command prompt now. And yes, believe it or not, some of the commands from the 1980s are still used today in the command prompt. Yes, yes, yes. All right, Apple II. Well, I remember those. 1983. There we go. 1984. Mac comes out with System 1.0, which is the, yes, you notice how they got the graphical user interface before Windows. So Windows still hasn't come out yet. 1985. Still sitting on command line interface for Microsoft. Mac's going through their System 2.0. There we go. Late 1985. Windows 1 comes out. What's the difference between the two? One is what and one is what?
One's color.
One's color, thank you. So yes, so moving into 1987. Here we are in 1987. So we're just going to continue on. Good old Minesweeper. No, I'm kidding. Good old Minesweeper in the 1980s. Not yet. Not yet. Notice it is a graphical user interface, but there's a lot more text in Windows than there is in Mac. Mac is definitely a lot more visual. All right, let's get into the 1990s. Come on, 1990s, where are you? We're almost there. Here we go. Now we're in the 1990s. So, yes, I know that was several decades ago. Now you start seeing Windows 3.0. We're starting to see icons now. Yes, I'll talk about icons in a few moments. Time's going to continue on. Notice now you have color now with Mac in the early 1990s. No, you're not going to be quizzed on this. I'm just doing this to humor you. Okay, 1992. It's scary I was alive during this whole time. 1992, 1993. So Mac starts picking it up a little bit here in 93. Notice the big difference now. Windows is still at 3.1 during this phase. So Windows stayed on 3.1 for quite some time. That is until Windows, you know what year's coming up. Good old Windows 95 is coming up. Here it comes, 1995. Oh, NT is for servers, everybody, networks. There you go, Windows 95. So that was the first time the start button for Windows existed. It was late 1995. So Windows 95 came out, and that start button has been there ever since. Well, almost. Don't get me started on Windows 8. Of course, I'm going to talk about Windows 8 soon. You know, I got a story behind that. But anyway, the start button's there. You notice that Mac starts picking it up here. Windows is just going to stay stagnant for a little while. So there's Windows 95. So 98's here, so Windows 98 comes out summer of 1998. Apple is still doing its thing. CE was for, if you see that in the upper right corner, that was for mobile devices. Then Mac OS Server comes out. Time continues to go on. There's Mac OS 9. Windows 2000 comes out. Windows Millennium Edition. Don't get me started on that one either. I think I went from 2000, I skipped Millennium Edition. But you notice the graphics capabilities now for Mac. You're really going to see it take off here. So Windows XP 2001. Believe it or not, there are still machines out there that have Windows XP on them, 2001. That was only 23 years ago. So time continues on. Again, you're going to notice Windows stays kind of stagnant during these years in the early 2000s. Mac's going to start seriously taking off with their graphics capabilities. You notice the other ones up here, server, CE, mobile. Again, CE was more for like portable devices at that time. So time continues on. Don't worry, we only got 10 more years of this to go. There's Mac OS Tiger. OS X Tiger. If you see SPs, those stand for service packs. So usually with each service pack, about 40,000 bugs in the code for the operating system were fixed with each service pack. So if you see SP1, SP2, SP2B, oh, Vista, don't get me started on that either. Late 2006, Vista comes out. I had the bright idea of upgrading us to Vista. That was not an upgrade. Still has the start button. But it was really weird. Like I had to start getting used to different menus during that time. Oh, the iPhone. That's right. The iPhone pops up finally. One of the early iPhones.
That was in 2005 or 6?
So that was 7.
7. What?
So anyway, time moves on. I know this goes really quick.
That's when the first iPhone came out.
So hopefully Vista's going to change. There we go. Okay, yes. Now I got us quickly to Windows 7. Once I was like, oh my God, get me off that. You see the iPads out now?
Fucking phone since then, golly.
You're like, yes, these things have been out this long? Yes, almost a generation now with iPhones and crazy, right?
Wow.
So time continues on, 2011, we only got 4 more years to go on the video. Yes, I'm going to talk a lot about operating systems today. Windows Phone. Now keep in mind, this doesn't include like Android stuff or any of that. We'll get into that too. We're going to get into that today as well. That's coming. Worst operating system of all time, Windows 8 came out in 2012. Worst operating system of all time, like hands down. Oh, I'll tell you my story when I get there, because I got to talk about it today. So, yes, I'll talk about it. Just awful. My students hated it too at that time, but I'll tell you that story in a minute. Thank God the 8.1 update came out, and then at the end of this, the whole class celebrated. Because Windows 8 went away. There's the watch. Bam! Windows 10, summer of 2015. That's when everybody rejoiced. And they were like, thank God, 8's going away. All right, that's all I got to say about that one. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because I don't need the video anymore. I just wanted to show you all that. Yes, I'll get ready for my next Linux video. Okay. All right, back on the screen. Here we go. I'm just happy it didn't track you, Justin, when you were walking by there. Okay, so yes, I'm trying to train the camera now that it follows me around. So yeah, I'm trying to get it working. All right, so there was your brief history from 1978 to 2015. Obviously, things have changed in the last 10 years. I'll get there in a minute. Oh, that's why it's not doing it. This one would help if I was there. All right, that's better. All right. So, as I said before, the operating system manages the computer's resources. I talked about the memory, I talked about the central processing unit that's processing storage, that's your available storage space on your device. Printers also, and also any monitors you have connected to the computer. It does help monitor system performance, which I'll talk about that in just a minute. It allows us to schedule tasks like backups, for example. Security. I hope you have security to get into your devices, one way, shape, or form, whether it's a password, whether it's biometric. You should have some kind of security that lets you into your device. As you see here, we all have to put in our usernames and passwords, and we have our two-factor authentication and all that other stuff. But yes, operating systems do provide the ability to have security. The operating system also is important in starting up and shutting down the computer. Believe it or not, yes, that's what we use. We now have graphical user interfaces. We've had graphical user interfaces for the better part of 4 decades now, depending on what operating system you've been using. And we do something called multitasking. I hope you know what that means. I'm going to tell you anyway. So we have the ability to go back and forth between applications all the time. We can have several applications open at once, just go between each one so that we can multitask. Foreground applications are applications that are running that you see in the foreground. The background applications, I hope you never mess with. That includes your operating system, because if you shut down the wrong process, you shut the computer completely down. I've done that. So yes, one day I just went through there and I'm like, what if I shut this down? What if I shut this down? What if I end this? I just shut my computer off and I'm like, nope, I shouldn't have done that. So yes, sometimes you get bored and you just want to try and figure things out, and that's what we do. So just like application software, you're going to see a lot of features that are in common with system software and also with application software. There are icons. So don't worry, I'll get to booting in a second. All right, fine, I'll tell you about the booting. So when the device is completely off and we turn it on, that's what we call a cold boot. We're booting it from a cold state. If we're restarting our device, it's a warm boot. Again, notice I used the word restarting. I didn't use anything else, not any of those other modes. I'm just talking about restarting the device. That's a warm boot because you're booting it again. So icons. Talked about icons before with application software. Sometimes we double click them, sometimes we right click them. We do things with these icons and they perform various commands, including opening applications, especially when we open applications. On our devices, on our mobile devices, you all have one, you have icons all over the place on that. You touch it and it opens the application. I mean, it's pretty easy. We also have pointers. On our mobile devices, most of you have this as your pointer. You have this thing. This is your pointer. This right here. Or it's this in some of our cases. Or it's this in some of our cases. Or it's this in some of our cases. Oh, wait, oh, don't do the other one. Okay, the other finger, that's right. So anyway, you might have those as your pointers. Sometimes when you move the mouse around, it changes shape depending on what you're hovering over. Windows, even for mobile devices, every application opens in a window. Same thing on Macs, same thing on Windows machines, same thing in Linux, etc. All the applications open in Windows. We see menus. Sometimes we see menus and sometimes we see tabs, depending on the application that we're in. My Mac folks, you have a lot of menus. I've noticed you have a lot of menus. So those are in there as well for operating systems. Dialog boxes. I don't think we have to really go over dialog boxes, I don't think, because we've seen them a lot before in Office already, right? So we have dialog boxes in operating systems as well. We also have the ability to get help when we need it in our operating system. We can ask our operating system a question and it will provide an answer. Yes, that's where we're at now. Yes, and you can even speak to your operating system and it will help you. No, I'm not going to say any of the magic words for our phones. That's a bad thing. I can't do that.
Do you think AI is going to change operating systems in the future?
It already has. Yeah, it's already doing that now. Yeah, because anytime I ask my phone in question, it always says like, gives me something back that says generated with AI. I'm like, bam, okay. And that's in the operating system. So yes, most definitely. It's just gonna keep evolving over time. Hopefully it's gonna get smarter, because sometimes I don't get the right answer and I'm like, what? So,
How do you do
yeah,
that?
so I try to test it out, asking it a lot of things, so, like, if I want my whole paper written for me, no, that's not gonna happen. I'm an instructor too that requires papers now in some classes, so I have to make sure people are actually doing the research instead of going out and doing AI. I'm telling all of you, do not ever reference or cite Wikipedia. You always go down to the articles down at the bottom of the Wikipedia page and you reference that. Don't ever put Wikipedia in your stuff, that's bad. Or don't ever put like generated by AI anywhere in any of your stuff, because I'm telling you, we will catch it. We will throw that back at you and say, rewrite that thing. If we're nice, that is if we're nice. If we're not, then, oh well. Okay, moving on. Gesture controls. So I hope you know what gestures are. Now we have operating systems out there that can be controlled by, especially like people that can't use their hands or feet, like they can move their heads and control, like when we're talking about gesture controls, we're talking about all that, whether it's hands, feet, face, any type of movement. We're gonna see more and more gesture controls out there as well as time goes on. It's just gonna get better. Files and folders, even on your mobile devices, yes, you still have folders and you still have files, believe it or not. In operating systems like Mac and Windows, it's pretty easy to get to those files and folders, but not so much on mobile devices. Unless you have an app that is like a file manager, then you can see all your files and folders that way. All right, so there are three categories of operating systems. I'm actually gonna go from right to left on this one instead of left to right. So for the longest time, we had what are called standalone operating systems. You would actually have a disk and you would install it on your device, and we called that a client or desktop operating system. Yes, you can do that with Windows 10, yes, you can do that with Windows 11. You can do that as long as you've purchased the license for it, you install it on your device, that's a desktop operating system. Network operating systems are like what all these computers are linked to. So all these computers are linked to a network operating system. And that's why I tell you all to please keep them on instead of off. So I think the class that was in here last night turned them all off. I came in here this morning and turned them all back on this morning. All the keyboards were like shoved and stuff too. So yeah, it was pretty gross, but I took care of all the machines for you all this morning. So anyhow, with a network operating system, people on the main campus, the IT staff, can actually update our computers here remotely, which is really, really nice. Then they don't have to keep driving out here to make updates. They can make the updates on specific computers. They see all the computers. They have the ability to do that in this room, and they can make the updates as they necessarily need to. Anyway, Windows Server, Linux, Unix, and I'm gonna talk about Linux and Unix in depth, including another cheesy video here in a few moments. It's coming, don't worry. So you'll have a good understanding of what Linux and Unix are, although you technically use one of these. I don't want to spoil it yet. So anyway, the operating system itself is stored on a server on the main campus, and it's essentially deployed to all the machines so that you have the ability to log in on any computer using, you notice that, you can log into any computer in the campus with your MEID and your password. No matter what building you're in, you have the ability to do that. So it's one big network operating system that they actually use on the main campus. They didn't tell me which one, but that's what it is. We all have phones, tablets, and stuff like that. Those are real-time operating systems, including your watches. So they're updated in real time. Also, any cable boxes that you have, those get updated in real time as well, or satellite boxes. Video game systems get updated all the time as well. So you gotta keep that in mind too. So that's where you find real time. If you think about what the term real time means, it means when the update is supposed to happen, it's gonna notify you that it needs to happen, and then you update it in real time. So I always make sure my phone is set for like 3 a.m. Now that I don't use it as an alarm anymore. I'm always worried about that. I'm like, if that update crashes, and it crashes my phone, I'm not gonna wake up in the morning. So I stopped using my phone as the alarm. I got myself another device to do that. But anyhow, I usually set mine at like 3 o'clock in the morning while I'm sleeping to update the operating system. So I go to bed, it's one operating system, I wake up, it's another one, and I'm like, oh, they changed it. So yeah, I usually don't get a heads up on that, it just happens. I hope you know what mobile operating systems are. They've been around for a while. Android, iOS, I'll be talking about those again in a moment. And also Windows Phone. And am I gonna mention BlackBerry? No, I'm not gonna mention BlackBerry. Okay, moving on. That's more for like chapter 8 in the history of phones, okay? I'll bring BlackBerry up again when we get to that point. All right, so Windows is still the most widely used operating system that's out there. Mac OS, you saw it in the video. Great graphics capability, power, easy to use. Unix and Linux. So, again, I'm gonna go into detail on these in just a moment. But with Unix, it was originally designed for the web. I kind of gave you a hint on the board, because you know I'm gonna write some stuff on the board here in a moment. Kind of gave you a hint, so you know what year it came out already. You see it up on the board. So it was originally for networks. Linux is non-proprietary, it's free. That means that, yes, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of versions of Linux out there. So you get the source code, you change the source code, and you make your own operating system. I make it sound easy, it's not easy, but it's free. It does not cost any money. All right, I'm gonna start with Windows. So Windows has been around for a really long time, as you've seen in the video that I just showed you a moment ago. So Windows 7, I'm only gonna stick to these 4 versions of Windows. So Windows 7 came out in 2009, and it's called the traditional user interface. It's got the start button. When you click the start button, a menu appears. You can choose options from it. You have Windows in the background, and you have your icons on the desktop that you can double click. Okay, so I had the brilliant idea in 2012, change all of our computers at home from 7 to 8. Okay, now, I'm the one that let out the shriek, the scream. When I went and installed Windows 8, it showed all these tiles, and I was like, okay, where's the desktop? So there's a button on there that actually says desktop. And when I clicked on the desktop button, my desktop appeared, and that's when I let out the scream. There were no icons, there were no buttons, there were no menus. It was a blank desktop with nothing on it. My wife comes running into the room and she's like, where'd all the files go? And I'm like, that's what I'm wondering. Like all the stuff was gone. No start button, no nothing. So I had to start doing research on how to add my icons to the desktop. Everything was still there, I just had to go find it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst operating system of all time. Luckily, and I had to also download a program that allowed me to have a start button on the desktop for Windows 8. It was terrible, it was awful. So Windows 8.1 came out and they finally put the start button back on the desktop, and I'm like, now they're gonna do it. So I was teaching this class during that time between 2012 and 2015, and the students were like, well, how come we're not on Windows 8 here at the campus? How come we're still on 7? I had to tell them why we were still on 7 at the campus, because of how horrible 8 was. Now 8 is good for like a tablet. Yeah, it looks like it can be used on a tablet pretty well, right? Like, I don't think it's too, I actually owned a tablet that had it. It wasn't too bad. But like for your actual computer, like if you click desktop and you see nothing, you would have done the same thing I did. You would have been like. So anyway, we all rejoiced when Windows 10 came out and Microsoft said if you own 7 or 8, you can upgrade to 10. So what do you think I did when I let the class out? I raced home. I'm like, I didn't even say anything. I'm just like, first computer. Wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm getting us off 8. She's like, I didn't even read anything about that. What version are we going to now? She's like, well, where was 9? Good question, right? It was 8.1 and then 10. So, yeah, I don't know. So anyway, the students were really happy. They're like, I'm like, everybody, mark your calendars. If you did what I did, or even if you're on 7, because the start button came back in Windows 10. So Windows 10 combined, bless you, the features of 7 and the features of 8 all in one. And speaking of AI, 10 also gave us the ability for Cortana at that point in time to be able to search or speak and search for things. Now we're on Windows 11. You notice all the icons in the taskbar, you have it all in front of you. All your icons in the taskbar down at the bottom of the screen are all in the center, which should remind you of another operating system that I'm about to talk about, where all those icons are located. But you notice they're all down there at the bottom of the screen. And so I've had some people tell me, well, it looks a lot like Mac. I'm like, yeah, that seems to be where the look is heading. But luckily, we still have the ability to search for stuff. I don't want to say it's dumbing us down, but now I don't have to hunt for things anymore on my computer. I just type a word down there at the bottom where it says search, and it comes up. I don't even have to look for the program anymore. I just type a couple letters and it comes up, and I'm like, well, we didn't have to do that in the old days. We had to actually find the stuff. We had to find the files. Now we can just type a couple letters and it comes up, which is beautiful. All right, for those that showed up early, I said this is going to be very word intensive on here. I am not going to read this slide. So I'm just going to tell you is, yesterday, people were allowed to install Mac OS 15 Sequoia. That was yesterday. That was September 16th. Yes, I had to edit the slide this morning to reflect this. So the beta version was out in July. Now it's out now for good. There have been many, many, many previous versions of this. The only couple that I want to point your attention to is Mojave in September 2018 was the first one that had the dark mode, where you can actually have like, it's dark instead of light, which I really liked. I really liked that feature. I did test that out, not on my Mac, but I tested it out on other people's Macs. I'm like, how come you don't have dark mode on? I'm like, ooh, that's really cool. So yes, that's one I want to point out. Another one I want to point out is Catalina. So in next week's class for the system unit, I'm going to talk about central processing units, or CPUs. I'm going to talk about that next Tuesday in chapter 5. And what I want to point out here is this is the first version of Mac to not support 32-bit applications. So there are 32-bit applications and there are 64-bit applications. If you buy a computer today, it's going to run all 64-bit applications, like a Windows machine, for example. Let's say that. If you buy a Windows machine today, and it runs all 64-bit applications, and it also runs the old 32-bit applications. So it can run both. Mac, however, can't run 32-bit applications anymore, starting in 2019. So it's all running 64-bit. If you're wondering what the bits are and the bytes are, we're going to talk about that next Tuesday. We'll talk about that next Tuesday. But you will notice, since 2020, down at the bottom, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one is the 5th one. So they've had 5 different versions of this operating system since 2020, which some of you are like, why so many versions? I don't know. Just because you notice how many are on the screen since 2012? That's what? That's like more than 10, right? Since 2012. So yeah, that's only been the last 12 years. But anyway, don't want to bore you to tears with that. Let's move on. Let's move on to something more interesting. That's why I wrote stuff on the board. So yes, I'm going to go back and forth between both sides of the room. Yes, the camera now zooms in on me when I'm at the board, which is really nice. I'm going to start over here, of course, because I always start on this. Everyone's like, you always start on that side of the room. I know. All right, so Unix operating systems. Unix operating systems, 1970, Bell Labs. 1970 is when that was developed. You notice that I have something in bold next to Unix operating system. Something in bold.
Personal computers.
Personal computers. So you're like, wait a minute, we use Unix? Yes, you do use Unix. Believe it or not. Every one of you in here right now is using Unix right now. And so am I.
Like on Kindles too?
Because remember the year. You saw the video. So you know operating systems have been around for a while. Linux, however, is different. Linux is an alternative to Windows. It's open source, meaning that the source code can be changed. So what Google did to create Chromebooks, they developed something called the Google Chrome operating system, which is based on Linux. So that's why some people are like, well, how come I can't install this on my Chromebook? Because it's Linux. It's not Windows and it's not Mac. So you got to treat it like it's a mobile device, essentially. So with Chrome OS, it focuses on internet connectivity, the speed of your connectivity, and it also focuses on cloud computing. You save everything to the cloud. That's why I keep telling my daughter, use a real computer when she's at home. Use a real computer. This isn't a real computer? I'm like, no, it's a mobile device. That's what it is. It saves everything to the cloud. Okay, so the speed is determined by the speed of the internet connection. Now, I get to show my cheesy video and I get to write on the board. Yes, people online, I'm going to keep my camera on, so if it cuts off that corner of the screen, so be it. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's right, I already got it queued up. That's right. I got this all down. It's not like I haven't been here for a while. All right, so here we go. I'm going to talk about this once again without the volume because I've used this video 1,000 times, and here we go. So Unix, once again, developed by Bell Labs in 1970. Linux, Linus Torvalds, 1991. You notice that there's a big difference here. And you know, based on the video you saw earlier, that operating systems have been out a lot earlier than 1991. You know this. So, a couple of different things while he's going to start talking. Unix, so how much money does Linux cost? I just talked about that a minute ago. Linux costs how much money?
Free.
It's free, right. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with free exclamation point. So if Linux is free, do we have to pay for Unix? Look what he's listing. Mac OS and Windows. Do we have to pay for those? Yes. So that's money. I'll put the dollar symbols. So Mac and Windows are Unix. Mac and Windows are Unix. Yes, I'm going to come over here and do this too. So Unix costs money, and Mac OS and Windows are here. Don't worry, we're going to get into more. It's coming. And Linux is free. Okay, so there, like I said before, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of versions of Linux out there. You know one of them, I just talked about it, the Chrome operating system, right? That's one. He's going to list a couple more here, I think. So there's Fedora, there's Ubuntu, there's many, many, many more. There's Raspbian for my Raspberry Pi people. My Raspberry Pi people, I know you're out there. So there's a bunch of different ones that are free. Yes, I'm going to jump back over here. I'm really testing the limits of the camera today. So Chrome OS, don't worry, I got some more questions for you in just a moment. You know what's coming, I hope. Fedora, Ubuntu, there's literally like hundreds, if not thousands. This is what Linux actually does look like on some machines. You notice that there is an actual desktop, there are actual icons that you can actually click on and use. And some companies are going to this because, well, it doesn't cost any money. Now, of course, if you're going to make your own version of Linux, you probably should hire a developer to go through the code and make your own company's version of Linux. But it can be done. I'm just telling you all it can be done. All right, that's the end of the video.
Just like that.
That's all I wanted to show with that. You're like, that's it? Yeah, I know that video.
I don't know how to use this shit.
Oh, there's a nice channel. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. All right, so I have some other questions for you. Android, where does Android go?
The worst thing that can happen is that I die, but it's a...
Who owns Android? Google, which means it goes where? It goes Linux, that's right. So Android is Linux. So if that's where Android is, where is iOS?
Unix.
Because
You have to pay for it.
it's owned by, all right, and you have to pay for it, yes. That's a correct answer.
Spanish.
Okay, I'm not done yet. Where does Xbox go?
Or
Who owns Xbox?
Unix, Microsoft.
It's Unix, that is correct. So Xbox goes up here. Now here's your trick question of the day, unless you want to go research it yourself. Where does PlayStation go? It's not owned by either Google or Microsoft.
It's owned by Sony, isn't it?
Yes.
Would it still
If you were to venture a guess, where do you think PlayStation would go?
Unix, because you still have to pay for it.
See, you would think that it's Unix because of the high cost, but believe it or not, you can look this up. It's based off of an operating system called FreeBSD, which is a version of, I said the word free, which is a version of Linux. So I'm going to put PlayStation, because it's FreeBSD, I'm going to put PlayStation down here with Android. I always have to ask these questions because I know that, those are they. I don't know which one Nintendo Switch is under. I've not done my research on that one. As much as I would love to do further research, I will let you go and do further research. But just please note the difference between Unix and Linux. All of us use Unix. I know probably a good portion of us probably use Linux to some extent. But again, a lot of different versions that are out there. But just keep in mind in the historic part of this too, 1970 versus 1991, that's a pretty big difference, believe it or not. All right, let's get out of there. Let's talk about another really, really big buzzword that you're going to hear in IT, and that is virtualization. So I'll make this real simple. Virtualization gives us the ability to run operating systems on our other operating systems on our computers. So for example, you're all using Windows 11 right now, right? So Windows 11 would be considered the host operating system. That's the operating system that's on the physical device. On each and every one of these computers, believe it or not, there should be an icon on your desktop called Oracle VirtualBox. Oracle VirtualBox, I'm not running all the way to that side of the room, so I'm just gonna run over here and point at this side of the, okay. So this is an example of a screenshot in Oracle VirtualBox. If you have different Linux operating systems, like you just download them, you can install them, and believe it or not, you can open them up here in its own virtual, we call it a virtual machine. In this case, it's the guest operating system. But what you have to do though, is you have to have enough available storage space on your device to be able to run each of these operating systems. So I decided to experiment with this at home. And what I found was, if I've got a terabyte hard drive, I can install all kinds of Linux operating systems using that software. Oracle VirtualBox is free of charge, by the way, if you ever want to play with this. But just keep in mind, you have to have enough hard drive space, enough storage space on your device to be able to actually run each of these. So I usually allocate something like 20 gigabytes for each one. So I think I had like 10 different versions on one of my hard drives, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I can play with all of these. So sometimes you have to deal with command line interfaces like you saw in the early operating systems. Sometimes you deal with actual desktops. But again, if you ever want to go play with this, you can. Linux does not cost any money. Keep that in mind. Linux does not cost any money. Now, I tried Windows 95 on this because, well, I had the disk with the key, so I could install Windows 95 in its own virtual machine, which I thought was really cool. So, yeah, this is why you keep the old operating systems around, right, with the keys so that you can install it in strange places. So just keep in mind that as long as you have the actual license, the actual operating system, you can install it using a program like Oracle VirtualBox. Mac has something called Parallels, which lets you run Windows programs. And keep in mind that Windows 8, 10, and 11 all have something called hyper-virtualization or Hyper-V. And yes, you can actually use these. But again, I love the Oracle program. The Oracle VirtualBox is killer. We use it here. We use it here for Linux. And for other things. I guess they're using it now in there for data analysis. Okay, moving on. That was a fun word. Now we're going to take a look at some utilities, and yes, I'm actually going to probably fire one of these up here on the Windows machine here. All right, so utilities are specialized programs to make computing easier. I love that term. And there are several essential utilities. We have troubleshooting and diagnostic programs, we have antivirus programs, backup programs, and file compression programs. All right, so the task manager. So it's funny. I hope my wife's not listening to this. So anyhow, at home this week, my wife goes, everything's running really slow on this computer and I don't know what to do. So I asked her to do this. I asked her to right-click the taskbar down here at the bottom of the machine, down here. Look, Task Manager shows up. So you right-click down here on the taskbar, Task Manager shows up, and Task Manager eventually shows. There it is. All right, don't worry. I can't show you Activity Monitor on the Mac, but I do have a slide for that coming up, so it's going to happen. So you notice that it shows how much of the central processing unit each program or each application is using. You notice OBS Studio, that's my streaming software, uses the most, and the rest sort of menial. Memory. So this is different than your storage space. This is memory that's installed on the actual computer. Yes, we'll talk about memory in Chapter 5, which is next week. You notice Chrome is using up a ton of memory. And Chrome has always, since its inception, used a lot of memory. Just keep that in mind. I don't know how my coworkers have like literally 100 tabs open at one time. I don't know how their computers don't slow down having that many tabs open. Me, maximum like 5 tabs. I can't have more than 5 tabs open. I start getting lost, so I gotta I close them, just keep closing them. But anyway, as you can see, Chrome, PowerPoint, and OBS Studio are chewing up a majority of the memory. The rest is all being used by these other background processes. And again, remember what I said earlier? Do not just shut down random background processes, because if you shut down the wrong one, it turns your device off. So please don't mess around with the background processes. Now, if it says it's not responding, you're obviously going to click on it and end the task. So you can click on it, and up here it says end task. You can click that to end the task. No, I'm not ending. Ooh, I could end the task manager from here, can't I? You're not going to dare me to do that. No, don't do that, Nick. Don't do that. All right. Anyway, there's a button over here on the left-hand side that says Startup Apps. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So here are all the applications that. So this is what I told my wife. You have to go into the startup applications, and you have to disable anything. Here's one that says Hi. So here's one that says Hi. I don't really know what that program is, so if I want to disable it at startup, which will speed up my startup process, I can simply click on it and click Disable up here in the upper right corner. Come on, don't make a liar out of me. You can't do that because you got to have admin. No, I'm not going to do the whole admin thing in front of the students because I can get admin on this computer. I'm just not going to do that. But anyway, on your home computers, you just click this. Especially if it says Startup Impact High, you should be disabling those. Because you can open up these applications anytime you want, but to have them at startup, that's not necessary. All right, moving on. So Sequoia has Activity Monitor. This used to look a lot nastier than this. I found this nice little picture that talks about how to quit processes. So if something is not responding, you can easily quit. You select the process and you quit it. You can see how much each application is using as far as the percentage of the central processing unit. And you're also going to take a look at CPU time. So you can actually sort this by clicking on any one of those columns. You can sort everything in the list. And it essentially works a lot more like Task Manager than it ever has before. All right, so if we ever want to do backups, file history is really good for backups. Yes, that's my actual flash drive that you see. That's my actual flash drive. I wanted to make a backup of it. So you notice my name's on it, right? So you know that that's got to be mine. Okay, so file history is really nice. We want to make a copy of different files in the libraries, contacts, favorites, our desktop. And so if our hard drive crashes, yes, we're going to talk about that soon enough in this class. We'll talk about hard drive crashes in this class if I haven't already. But if that does happen to you, then you do have a backup of all your files. Of course, a lot of you store your files now in the cloud, so if your computer goes away, you simply get another one and bring all your files back up. Mac has Time Machine. Mac's had Time Machine since the dawn of time. That was horrible, I know. But anyway, it's still there. It's still there in Sequoia. I did all the research on this. It's still there. But what's really nice about this is this allows you to go back through all of your backups. So, yeah. So say you backed up something a year ago and it's still there. It keeps track of all of that with a timeline. Good old disk cleanup. So some people go, why on earth would I use disk cleanup? Well, if you install a whole bunch of different programs, a bunch of different applications on your computer, sometimes there are residual files, even though you're like, well, I deleted the installation file. Yeah, you did that, but there's still other residual files that are laying out there. So disk cleanup allows you to free up space on your hard drive. Yes, these were all screen captures from my stuff. So just keep in mind that it eliminates non-essential files and it frees up disk space. Sequoia has disk utility, and disk utility has changed a little bit from the past. So all those buttons you see in the upper right corner, volume, first aid, etc., those all used to be in the center of the disk utility. Now it's in the upper right corner of the disk utility. So if you ever need to use this on a Mac, just go into your applications folder, your utilities folder, and you will find it under disk utility. Okay. So this is a preview of Chapter 7. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about this now. So traditional hard disks, they call them hard disks, not hard drives. So if you ever hear me say hard drive, it's the same term as hard disk, okay? So files are organized in what we call tracks and sectors. I'm coming over here now, everybody. So you'll notice on the bottom left of the slide, you'll see that, yes, these are the platters, the spinning platters on a traditional hard disk. You'll notice that they're made up of concentric rings, which we call tracks. Inside each of those concentric rings, they have sectors. Inside of each of those sectors, they have bytes of storage space. So the larger the capacity of the hard disk, the more bytes that are packed into each one of those sectors. So, if you're wondering how a file becomes fragmented, when you first save a file to your computer, all of the bytes, or I'm putting this down, all the bytes, I don't want to use my hands, are all tightly packed together, okay? But over time, let's say you don't open that file for like another 2 years. So over time, on a traditional hard disk, the bytes start becoming basically particles, right? Start spreading. They become fragmented. So the purpose of a defragmenter then is to do what? It's to take all these particles and bring them back together. That's the purpose of a disk defragmenter. I think one of the answers on today's quiz is density, and I don't talk about density, but just think about like density, okay? So that's for a traditional hard disk, which have spinning platters. But what about solid state drives? They're like, Nick, you haven't talked about solid state. Yeah, I did. I talked about solid state drives in chapter 1. Solid state drives are circuit boards, essentially, where electricity moves. So do we need to ever defragment a solid state drive? What's your answer?
No.
No, we do not, because it's all stored in chips. There's no moving parts. So that's where we're going with this. So at home, I now no longer have any computer that has an actual spinning hard drive. No more. It's all solid state now. And the funny thing is, I'm still waiting for one of those drives to die. You can throw it in the washer. No, you haven't thrown your flash drive in the washer just for fun to see if it survives? I have. You ever tried to run one over with your vehicle to see if it survives? I have. Some of those solid state drives are pretty good. You're like, you just waste money on that? No, they still work, so I didn't waste the money. I wouldn't suggest driving over your solid state drive, but with a vehicle. But okay, all right. So we also have utility suites. I sort of alluded to these suites in chapter 2 when I was talking about the web. But keep in mind that for your computers, there are suites like Norton Utilities, for example, which all those utilities I just talked about are all in one dashboard. Oh, I'm coming back over here because it's on this side of the screen. So you notice that you have your dashboard here on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll notice that there's Windows Startup, the programs that open up at startup. There's optimizations, there's defragmenting, there's all of those all in one screen. But here's what I'm telling you. If you learn how to use the utilities on your operating system, you do not need something like this. If you can do it yourself, do it yourself. Don't spend the money on it. I mean, it's nice to have it all in one screen, but you're smart. I know you are. All right, now I get to have the device driver talk, and I get to use a story today. I get to update this story based on something that happened this week at my house. Yes, isn't that nice? So, our original Epson EcoTank printer finally bit the dust. Like it said, we needed a maintenance box. My wife actually ended up buying one for 20 bucks on Amazon, and she says she's gonna fix that. But we can't print when the machine's down, right? So we had a backup printer, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. So we had a backup printer. It's not the same one though, it's a different model, right? But it's still like same, it's the EcoTank printers. That's all we do, is we use the EcoTank printers, because they're awesome. You squeeze the ink into them. So you've seen the commercials. So anyway, no you haven't. If you haven't, look it up, Google it. So we plug her computer into the printer, and guess what? It's not printing. It doesn't even detect the printer. So of course she gets mad, because that's what my wife does over 23 years. She gets mad. And so I'm like, well, if you have something else to do, I'm like, you just go to the manufacturer's website of the printer. She's like, I just have to type in Epson and the model and device driver, and sure enough, guess what came up? The link to the device driver came up. Installs the device driver. Of course, then she's sitting there because the progress bar starts going across the screen, it goes like 10%. I have things to do. I'm like, then go do them. I'll sit here and wait for it. I said, you know, I'm not gonna sit here and wait for it. I'm gonna go do something. But it'll be done at some point. So 15 minutes later, it finally finished. And I hope that doesn't take that long for you all. But then we could finally print to it directly connecting to the printer. Like it was a direct connection through the USB port. So you would think it would have been plug and play, but it wasn't. We had to go to download the dang device driver. So keep that in mind. Even if you have a new printer and an older operating system that might not have the device driver, and there's also the opposite, where you have a new operating system and you have a really old printer that you're trying to connect, and the device driver's not there either. And you gotta go install it. So just keep in mind that you can do this through the control panel, devices and printers, you can go at it. Yes, that second screenshot down there is for real. I think that has the President's color printer on it. Yeah, bottom left corner. So I was actually able to add the President's office color printer, and it actually said I printed stuff to it. So I had to like call somebody up there and go, hey, can you go run over to the printer and see if something printed? Are you printing stuff? I'm like, yes, I'm able to print stuff from my work computer to your color printer. Isn't that nice? How are you doing this? I'm like, it's called adding the printer. So, yes, just keep in mind that device drivers are extremely important when you want to, especially like when you want to print something. But think about this too. If you plug something else into a computer, not a printer, and it doesn't work, like it's not detecting it, please go to the manufacturer's website of the thing that you're plugging into the computer to see if you can find a device driver for the computer. So in that way, they communicate. The device that you're plugging in and the computer can communicate that way. All right, enough of that. You're like, we're at the end? Yes, we're at the end, everybody. I did not ramble that much today. We are at the end. You know, when you see this slide, you know we're at the end. So, computer support specialist resolves common networking problems, uses troubleshooting programs. Employers are looking for bachelor's degrees now, certificates, certifications, and the median. Now, when I talk about the median, again, that's the 50th percentile. That means half the jobs are over $71,530. I did not get the 2024 number from BLS.gov, but that's where I go to get The book doesn't give you these dollar amounts, so I just go to bls.gov and I type in whatever job we're talking about and I get the numbers. Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Thank you.
Occupational Outlook Handbook is where I get all this stuff from. They keep it pretty current. I don't think I just changed this one. And then your book talks about the IBM Aware supercomputer that is self-repairing, self-updating, and self-protecting. So that means if something dies on it, it ends up repairing itself. That's some scary stuff, right? But just keep in mind that these are out there. All right. And that is a wrap. People at home watching, you were an excellent crowd today. We had no spam messages in the chat. I thank the spam bots for not doing that to us again today. But hey, we're going to see you hopefully on Thursday for our last chapter of Word. And yes, we are going to be putting an image into a Word document on Thursday. See you all later.